My name is Dr. Donna Roberts, and this presentation is about the neuropsychological impact of technology, changes in brain structure and function. In 2008, American writer on technology and culture, Nicholas Carr, wrote a groundbreaking article, "Is Google Making Us Stupid? What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains?" which was highly critical of the Internet's effect on cognition. The Atlantic published Carr's article as the cover story of its annual Ideas issue. Carr claimed that the ubiquitous use of the Internet was not only directing the course of our individual and collective lives, but also actually physically altering our brains and cognitive processes. He argued specifically that the Internet may have detrimental effects on cognition, saying, "What the net seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation. My mind now expects to take in information the way the net distributes it, in a swiftly moving stream of particles." The article went viral, prompting an outpouring of anecdotal confirmation from both average citizens and experts in various fields alike, perhaps in response to the previously unspoken concern about the widespread increased use of electronic access to information. Perhaps it was just the tempting lure of nostalgia. One example of this: a pathologist on the faculty of the University of Michigan Medical School, Bruce Friedman, said, "His thinking has taken on a staccato quality, reflecting the way he quickly scans short passages of text from many sources online." "I can't read War and Peace anymore," he admitted. "I've lost the ability to do that. Even a blog post of more than 3 or 4 paragraphs is too much to absorb. I skim it." These anecdotal responses, generally centered around a waning attention span and a lack of ability to engage in deep thinking, and were tinged with dismay and concern, if not panic. Another example: Marianne Wolf, a developmental psychologist at Tufts University and the author of Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain, says, "We are not only what we read, we are how we read." Wolf worries that the style of reading promoted by the net, a style that puts efficiency and immediacy above all else, may be weakening our capacity for deep reading. What we read online, she claims, we tend to become mere decoders of information. Our ability to interpret text, to make the rich mental connections that form when we read deeply and without distraction, remains largely disengaged. She cites evidence such as the media or other technologies we use in learning and practicing the craft of reading play an important part in shaping the neural circuits inside our brains. Experiments demonstrate that readers of ideograms, such as the Chinese, develop a mental circuitry for reading that is very different from the circuitry found in those of us whose written language employs an alphabet. The variations extend across many regions of the brain, including those that govern such essential cognitive functions as memory and the interpretation of visual and auditory stimuli. And she takes her argument from the individual to the larger macro environment. Deep reading, as Marianne Wolf argues, is indistinguishable from deep thinking. If we lose those quiet spaces or fill them up with content, we will sacrifice something important, not only in ourselves, but in our culture. As we come to rely on computers to mediate our understanding of the world, it is our own intelligence that flattens into artificial intelligence. Carr's article spurred not only lively dialogue, but also a flurry of popular books written by experts in various fields addressing aspects of the topic. In 2009, neuroscientist Dr. Gary Small and Gigi Vorgan published iBrain, Surviving the Technological Alteration of the Modern Mind, exploring the evolution of the human brain caused by today's constant technological presence. Dr. Small's iBrain separates the digital natives from the digital immigrants and suggests that the Internet, with its virtually limitless wealth of news and information, is radically altering the way young minds are developing and functioning. The book also addresses the issue from a macro as well as a micro perspective. In this era of Google, Facebook, and YouTube, iBrain represents a guide to understanding the impact of this new brain evolution on our society and our future, as well as a warning of its potential dangers: attention deficit disorder, social isolation, internet addiction, etc. Another example of the type of publication that resulted from this concept flooding the social consciousness was Dr. Larry Rosen's 2010 book, Rewired: Understanding the I Generation and the Way They Learn, which focused on the new generation's radically different learning styles and needs. Then later, in 2010, building on that earlier article in The Atlantic that started it all, Carr published The Shallows: What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, citing further evidence from neurological science studies on the physical and cultural consequences. Still later in 2010, Chris Wowen published Virtual Child: The Terrifying Truth About What Technology is Doing to Children, and citing the profound impact on their physical, mental, social, and academic development, including such maladies as developmental delays, child obesity, increased childhood aggression, and unmanageable behaviors. These works sparked an ongoing scientific and popular debate surrounding our deepening dependence on networking technology. Was this technology actually changing our brains? And was this good or bad? In short, was Google making us stupid, as Carr first claimed? So the broader question also exists about the evolution of this widespread debate. Is this pop culture hype or real science? Is this hyperbole to induce click counts, sell books, or just incite the masses? Or is this a real modern medical phenomena worthy of concern and intervention? The Case for Science. A 2011 article in the journal Science took a look specifically at the topic initiated by Carr. The article claimed the advent of the Internet with sophisticated algorithmic search engines has made accessing information as easy as lifting a finger. No longer do we have to make costly efforts to find the things we want. We can Google the old classmate, find articles online, or look up the actor who was on the tip of our tongue. The results of 4 studies suggest that when faced with difficult questions, people are primed to think about computers. Basically, looking it up on a computer is their go-to strategy. And that when people expect to have future access to information, they have lower rates of recall of the information itself and enhanced recall instead for where to access it. Basically, we assess our need to memorize information. The Internet has become a primary form of external or transactive memory, where information is stored collectively outside ourselves. Basically, the article had these general conclusions. Search engines are rerouting our memory. We're not necessarily losing our ability to remember things. Rather, the Internet is changing how we remember. It was summed up nicely, saying people are recalling information less and instead can remember where to find the information they have forgotten. A similar article in 2016 discussed cognitive offloading, how the Internet is increasingly taking over human memory. Researchers at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign published a study in the journal Memory, which looked into the processes of cognitive offloading, or relying on Google, GPS, and other external devices for what we used to use our memories for. Our increasing reliance on the internet and the ease of access to the vast resources available online is affecting our thought processes for problem solving, recall, and learning. Researchers have found that cognitive offloading, or the tendency to rely on things like the internet as an information aid, increases after each use. Again, once we use this strategy, it becomes our go-to plan. Lead author, Dr. Benjamin Storm, commented, "Memory is changing. Our research shows that as we use the internet to support and extend our memory, we become more reliant on it. Whereas before, we might have tried to recall something on our own, now we don't bother. As more information becomes available via smartphones and other devices, we become progressively more reliant on it in our daily lives. With a world of information a Google search away on a smartphone, the need to remember trivial facts, figures, and numbers is inevitably becoming less necessary to function in everyday life." On a more serious note, internet addiction is another topic of research interest. A Chinese study of internet addicts mapped changes in the areas charged with attention, control, and executive function signified by abnormal white matter, essentially extra nerve cells built for speed. The changes turn out to be similar to those observed in the brains of addicts and alcoholics. And just as with other forms of addiction, experts say the high of continuous connection is associated with similar jagged, inevitable come-downs, depressive stretches, shattered concentration, and a pervasive, indeterminate malaise. Various studies, beginning in the 1990s, addressed the issue of internet addiction. They concluded that maladaptive use of the internet has resulted in impairment of the individual's psychological well-being, academic failure, and reduced work performance. While addiction represents a special and extreme reaction among normal functioning, more studies are demonstrating that digital technologies often both facilitate and slow down productivity at the same time. That what we gain in efficiency may be offset by unexpected consequences. The effect of distractions at work is well documented, and interruptions generate two types of interference. Capacity interference occurs when the number of demands on our attention is greater than our ability to deal with them. Structural interference happens when the brain is required to manage two inputs that require the same physiological mechanism. Both these types of interference result in a drain on our cognitive processing resources and reduce performance, leading to short-term memory loss or confusion. A study for Hewlett-Packard carried out at King's College London into IQ levels of subjects who were given challenges while new emails were dropped into their inboxes showed an average reduction of an IQ of 10 points. Interruptions have much greater detrimental impact on our cognitive ability than is commonly thought. The more complex the task, the greater the negative impact. Nathan Zeldis, president of the Information Research Overload Group, has performed detailed calculations in order to estimate time lost from interruption and recovery. He claims that 8 hours in a 40-hour week is lost in this way. In addition, many studies indicate that multitasking is actually a myth and that engaging in such switching behaviors increases the time required to complete a task, the stress level, and the number of inaccuracies. Various researchers have also examined the differences between traditional reading of print material and online or screen reading. In Words on Screen, Naomi Barron, an expert on language and technology, compared the ways in which we read in print and on screen. Between 2013 and 2015, she gathered data from 429 university students drawn from 5 countries: the US, Japan, Germany, Slovenia, and India. Digital reading is increasingly popular. Reading on screen has many virtues, including convenience, potential cost savings, and the opportunity to bring free access to books and other written materials to people around the world. Yet, Barron argues, the virtues of e-reading are matched with drawbacks. Users are easily distracted by other temptations on their devices. Multitasking is rampant, and screens coax us to skim rather than read in depth. Furthermore, if the way we read is changing, so is the way we write. Her review also noted that a number of researchers have sought to measure learning by asking people to read a passage of text, either in print or on a digital device, and then testing for comprehension. Most studies have found that participants scored about the same when reading in each medium, though a few have indicated that students performed better on tests when they read in print. When asked to read a story in print and on a digital device, and then asked to reconstruct the plot sequence, print yielded better results. Professors now consider replacing long or complex reading assignments in favor of short or more straightforward ones, moving closer to digital reading patterns in the non-academic world, which uses condensed versions of text and shorter reading material that is bite-sized. In a 2008 report in the New York Times on reading online versus reading in print, Guinevere Eden, director of the Center for the Study of Learning at Georgetown, told the Times, "The brain is malleable and adapts to its environment. Whatever the pressures are on us to succeed, our brain will try to deal with it. The question is, does it change your brain in some beneficial way?" In sum, certain types of memory are improving. When the brain reroutes how we recall information, it develops different types of memory capabilities. Science offers this example. If somebody asks you how many national flags have just one color, do you think first about the actual flags? Or does your brain jump right to how you would find it? If you're an active Google user, you probably already started thinking of keywords. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. The brain is very specialized in its circuitry, and if you repeat mental tasks over and over, it will strengthen certain neural circuits and ignore others, says Gary Small, a neuroscience professor at UCLA. But the debate sparked by Carr's insidious question, "Is Google making us stupid?" has also been fueled by sensationalism and hyperbole. In the US, in the past decade, there has been a 66% rise in ADHD diagnoses. Arguments differ regarding the relationships of cause and effect. The proportion of 17-year-olds who read nothing whatsoever unless required to do so for school more than doubled between 1984 and 2004, a period that oversaw the rise of personal computers, the internet, and video games. Perhaps we are witnessing not a decline in book reading, but merely a renaissance. There is an unspoken nostalgia for an age when book learning was the noblest of pursuits, and this has invigorated the debate about the dumbing down of America. To look back where this all began, we see both science and hyperbole. Carr argues that the internet, like other technologies, is slowly changing the way we think. It is rewiring our brains, building new neural pathways to replace those we no longer use. The internet, he claims, is threatening to diminish our humanness, namely the ability to think and feel deeply. The repetition of our actions on the internet leads our brains to create new synapses and new firing routes for our neurons. Thus, our brains come to expect a speedy source of information that they can sample quickly as we navigate from link to link and online page to online page. It follows, therefore, that the internet is altering the circuitry of our brains. But this has all happened before with the advent of any new technology. Books, clocks, television. Carr makes the case that all technological advances have influenced the way we think and the way our minds work. To answer the questions of whether the internet and like technologies are changing our brains, we look to basic neuroscience, the fundamental concept of neuroscience and human development. The adult brain weighs about 1.4 kilograms, or 3 pounds, and contains about 100 billion brain cells, or neurons. As babies develop, many changes take place in the brain. Neurons grow, which accounts for some of the change, but the wiring, the intricate network connections between the neurons, undergoes the most significant change. Synapses start to multiply early in fetal development and go on multiplying for many months. A 1-year-old baby's brain consequently contains many more connections than does an adult brain. The increase in the number of synapses is followed by a period of pruning in which excess connections wither away. This process is largely pre-programmed. It will happen no matter what environment the baby is in. However, the environment does influence the synaptic pruning, in that frequently used connections are strengthened and infrequently used connections are eliminated. The pruning that is associated with learning throughout life is similar. Synapses that are frequently used have strong connections, while the rarely used synapses are eliminated. In short, our brain is always changing in response to our experience. So the next question considers whether the changes brought on by the ubiquitous use of technology are for better or for worse. Carr slants toward arguing that these changes are detrimental. He contends, the net delivers precisely the kind of sensory and cognitive stimuli, repetitive, intensive, interactive, addictive, that have been shown to result in strong and rapid alterations in brain circuits and functions. I'm sure that most of us who use the internet feel in some way that our habits are changing. We check our email constantly to see if new messages have arrived. We skim the contents of pages we click on, all of which suggests that our very wiring is changing as well. Carr argues that search engines lead to fragmented thinking. When we search the web, we remain on the surface of the depths of knowledge that we could immerse ourselves in. If only we could stop our fingers from clicking on page after page and our eyes from skimming the electronic text for key information. In addition, Carr argues that the internet is destroying our attention spans and making it more difficult for us to concentrate. Since neuroplasticity allows our brain to develop space for new skills, replacing the space once allotted for skills we no longer use, Carr argues that the net seems to be chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation. He continues, whether I'm online or not, my mind now expects to take in information the way the net distributes it, in a swiftly moving stream of particles. The essence of that question may lie in that last statement. Whether I'm online or not, my mind now expects to take information the way the net distributes it, in a swiftly moving stream of particles. Is this better or worse? Is this dysfunctional or adaptive? Overall, Carr suggests, even though the internet is undoubtedly a useful tool, it may be slowly robbing us of our humanness. causing us to sacrifice the very qualities that separate us from machines. He argues that when we use a technology to amplify a particular part of our bodies, we distance our brain from that body function, numbing a part of ourselves. The Internet's rewiring of our brains may prevent us from thinking deeply and relating to others, as deep thinking and empathy require more time and mental processing. He cites an experiment performed by Antonio Damasio, director of USC's Brain and Creativity Institute, whose results confirm that, quote, the more distracted we become, the less able we are to experience the subtlest, most distinctively human forms of empathy, compassion, and other emotions. Indeed, this is an unsettling thought. So again, we return to the fundamental questions. Is the Internet really changing our brains? And is this rewiring good or bad? So what is the Internet doing to our brains? Some researchers have argued that increased use of technology has resulted in positive effects, including becoming adept at discriminating facts more accurately, making decisions more quickly, exhibiting flexibility in problem solving, and demonstrating heightened analytical skills. They maintain that unprecedented growth of technology, coupled with the ability to access multiple sources of information, is rewiring our brains and making them more elastic. Other researchers argue that the intrusion of technology into virtually every aspect of our lives hinders contemplative thought, conversation, deep processing, and patience, characteristic of previous generations. Perhaps the real answer encompasses both views, depicting an adaptive change whereby something is lost, but something is gained. What is the Internet doing to our brains? The simple answer is that it is making us think and behave differently. It is rewiring our brains and changing how we process information. Of that, there is no doubt. But that does not mean we are getting dumber in the process. Google is not necessarily making us stupid. What makes people intelligent is their ability to learn and reason. In short, to adapt and thrive within their environment. Thus, if the environment in which we operate has changed, and it certainly has, then to adapt our processing of it is natural and in support of thriving in that environment. Perhaps Charles Darwin said it best. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. Thank you.